Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She didn't lower her voice when she said it. We were sitting at Olive Garden, her nails tapping against the stem of a cheap wine glass, her eyes drifting past me to the waiter like I wasn't even there. "You're good, but I need more." That word, more, cut deeper than I expected. My hands froze around the mug of coffee I hadn't even ordered. I just stared at the dark surface, the steam curling upward. "Okay," I said. Nothing else. No defense. No questions. Just one word. The silence that followed was heavier than her words. She went back to scrolling on her iPhone, smiling at something that wasn't me. I sat there, watching her laugh at a notification, realizing that I'd been reduced to background noise in her life. Not hated, not loved, just convenient. When we left the restaurant, she walked a step ahead, swinging her Target shopping bag like a trophy, already on the phone with someone else. I trailed behind, my mind quiet, too quiet. I think that was the moment everything shifted, not in her world, but in mine. She thought she'd humiliated me. What she didn't see was that I'd stopped playing the part she wrote for me. I didn't argue with her that night. I didn't bring it up at all. But the words replayed every time I opened my laptop. At work, I was invisible, the IT guy who kept the servers alive and the passwords reset. At home, I was the silent man on the couch while she chased whatever shiny thing the world dangled in front of her. I realized I'd let her define me, not because she was strong, but because I was quiet. And that quiet had been mistaken for weakness. The next morning, I drove her to her office in my old Toyota Camry. She didn't notice that I didn't say goodbye. She didn't notice that I didn't look back. She was too busy checking her reflection in the rearview mirror, touching up her lipstick before walking into the glass building where ambition lived and loyalty died. That evening, while she texted from the bedroom, laughing at something on Facebook Marketplace, I sat in the living room with my MacBook and opened a blank document. I wrote 3 words: plan, build, exit. They weren't for her. They weren't even for me in that moment. They were for the man I had decided to become. From that night forward, I kept my mouth shut and my eyes open. I withdrew, not dramatically, not with scenes or slammed doors. I just stopped showing up emotionally. I cooked my own meals. I opened separate accounts. I stayed late at work, then later still, until home was just a place I slept. She didn't notice at first. Why would she? I'd always been predictable, stable, boring. But stability, I was beginning to understand, is just another word for foundation. And foundations can be rebuilt, stronger than before, if you have the patience to stay silent while the walls around you crack. And I was very patient. The strange thing about silence is how easily it slips under people's skin. At first, she didn't notice. She thought my quiet was the same as always. Me, the steady backdrop to her constant noise. But it wasn't the same. Something inside me had folded shut, and the more I pulled back, the louder her world became. I started planning quietly. I opened a savings account under my name alone and funneled every extra dollar into it. Every late-night coding session that once went into fixing company servers began to morph into something else. Lines of code that belonged to me, not them. I was building something in the shadows, and the strange calm of it gave me more energy than I'd felt in years. She didn't see it. She saw the man who didn't complain when she came home late, the man who nodded when she said she had another networking dinner, the man who kept the house from collapsing while she lived in her curated Instagram version of ambition. I let her keep that illusion. Her colleagues started to notice before she did. One Saturday morning, when I was taking out the trash, our neighbor, Mrs. Collins, stopped me at the curb. She looked at me the way people do when they've been holding something in. "You've lost weight," she said. "You finally look like you're breathing again." I just smiled, thanked her, and walked back inside. The words echoed though. Breathing again. She was right. The distance grew naturally. I wasn't cold to her, just absent. I answered her questions with short, flat words. I sat through dinners with her friends at Applebee's, hearing them laugh about office gossip, while I thought about server costs and investor decks. I was there, but not really. And when her coworker, Daniel, leaned across the table one evening and asked her, "You're out without him again? I thought he was your rock." I caught the flicker in her eyes. She laughed it off, but for a second, I saw it, the awareness that something was slipping away. I didn't confirm it. I didn't deny it. I just kept going. Nights became code. Weekends became research. I'd leave her sipping Starbucks in the living room, scrolling Amazon for things we didn't need, while I locked myself in the office with nothing but the glow of my screen. I could hear her laughter, her calls, her busy, endless need for more. But the more she reached outward, the deeper I sank into my own creation. I wasn't just pulling away from her. I was pulling toward something else. And though she didn't know it yet, every quiet night, every short answer, every calm look across the table was another brick in the wall that separated who I had been from who I was becoming. And that wall was getting higher. Proof has a way of finding you when you least expect it. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't digging through her phone or scrolling her emails. But silence has its own gravity, and one night it pulled me toward the truth. She had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter, a half-empty glass of wine next to it. Notifications kept flashing in the corner of the screen. I don't know what made me walk closer, what made me look. But when I did, it wasn't just the names that caught me. It was the tone. Messages from someone she called more exciting, someone who filled the space I had quietly vacated. Dinner plans, weekend trips, compliments that dripped with the kind of attention she once craved from me. I didn't take screenshots. I didn't confront her. I closed the laptop as if I hadn't seen a thing. But in that moment, something settled in me. Not anger, not rage, just certainty. She had said she needed more, and she had gone looking for it. I sat in the living room after she fell asleep, staring at the walls we'd painted together, the furniture we'd picked at Walmart when money was tight. Every corner of the house carried a story of us, but those stories no longer held weight. They were artifacts of someone else's life. Mine had already shifted. The next day, I didn't act different. I kissed her on the cheek before she left, handed her coffee like always, listened to her laugh into her phone as she walked out the door. But inside, my mind was sharp, clear. The startup I'd been sketching out in fragments suddenly became urgent. I pulled together the files, the budget, the rough prototypes. Every piece of proof I had of her betrayal became fuel, not for revenge, but for discipline. At work, I stopped lingering in the background. I began logging hours no one asked for, not for the company, but for myself. The code was cleaner, faster. I began tracking financial flows, studying patterns, building something that had nothing to do with her, nothing to do with who I had been. My boss noticed. A friend from college reached out after seeing my progress on LinkedIn. Doors began to shift open, small at first, but visible. She never noticed the difference in my face. She didn't see how my expression had changed, how my silence had weight now, not emptiness. She thought I was still her quiet IT guy, her background stability. What she didn't realize was that every proof I found of her double life was another nail in the coffin of the version of me she once knew. And I wasn't mourning that man. I was burying him. Disappearing isn't about vanishing overnight. It's about removing yourself piece by piece until your absence becomes undeniable. That's how it started with me. One Friday, I turned my phone off at work and left it in my desk drawer. I drove out past the city, checked into a cheap motel off the highway, and spent the weekend writing lines of code until my eyes burned. She called, texted, left voicemails. At first, her tone was casual, then annoyed, then sharp. By Sunday evening, it had shifted into panic. But I stayed silent. When I finally came home late that night, she was pacing the living room in her Lululemon joggers, clutching her iPhone like it was a lifeline. She asked where I'd been. I told her I'd been working. Nothing more. No explanations. No apologies. The more vague I was, the harder she pressed. But I didn't bend. I let the silence sit between us like a wall she couldn't climb. After that, I started pulling away in ways she couldn't predict. I canceled our joint credit cards without warning and opened new ones in my name. I stopped answering her midday calls. I ate dinners alone, sometimes at Waffle House, sometimes not at all. My absence wasn't angry. It was strategic. The more I slipped away, the more she scrambled to hold on to something that no longer belonged to her. At night, when she was out with colleagues, I studied financial loopholes, startup grants, investment pitches. My project was growing, no longer just an idea, but a structure. I rented a small office space downtown, something she never asked about because she assumed I was still the same man, still predictable. But every time she texted asking when I'd be home, and I answered with a flat late, her voice cracked a little more. The silence unnerved her. That was the point. A man who once asked nothing of her had become a man she couldn't read at all. And when you can't read someone, you can't control them. I started noticing how often she looked through the blinds, waiting for me to pull into the driveway. How she lingered in the kitchen, listening for the door. She tried harder to appear casual, but her eyes betrayed her. She was losing grip. I didn't confront her. I didn't expose what I knew. I just disappeared, bit by bit, leaving her to wonder where I was, what I was doing, and, most painfully, why I no longer cared to tell her. And the truth was, I didn't need to tell her. My silence was the loudest answer she would ever get. The man she was seeing, because by now I no longer doubted it, wasn't smarter than me. He wasn't stronger. He was just new. And newness fades. I didn't need to expose him with drama. All I had to do was wait and strike where he was weakest. Through quiet observation, I found it. He wasn't careful with his reputation. He bragged online, shared too much in the wrong places, left digital footprints in public spaces where people like me live unnoticed. It didn't take long before I pieced together things he wouldn't want anyone to know. Sketchy financial dealings, a side hustle that crossed into gray legal areas, connections he thought were invisible. I packaged it neatly. Not traced back to me, not obvious, just enough for the right people to notice. Anonymous tips sent to places that mattered. Whispers passed where they would echo. And within weeks, the cracks began to show. His company stalled. Projects got delayed. His glossy exterior started to dull. She noticed. She tried to hide it, but I saw the subtle change when she scrolled through her phone at night, the frustration in her eyes when his name popped up. She started asking me odd questions again, pretending to care. "You've been working late? You okay?" But her voice carried a tremor. Not worry for me. Worry that she was losing control. Meanwhile, I was gaining ground. My project had grown into something solid, something real. I secured meetings, interest from people with capital, investors who didn't laugh but leaned forward when I spoke. The foundation I had been building in silence began to feel like a fortress. I still didn't confront her. That would have given her too much. Instead, I let her world wobble while mine grew steady. I went to bed early, woke up before sunrise, left before she even noticed. She'd text in the mornings, trying to sound light. "Breakfast?" My reply was always the same. "Already ate." The man she thought was replacing me was unraveling, not because of my anger, but because of my calculation. And she didn't even know I had moved the pieces. To her, it must have looked like bad luck, coincidence, the natural collapse of something built on nothing. What she couldn't see was that my silence wasn't passive anymore. It was active, deliberate. Every step I took away from her was a step closer to the man I was becoming. And when his world began to crumble, hers started to shake with it. She just didn't know the epicenter wasn't him. It was me. The collapse wasn't sudden, it was public. That made it worse for her. One evening, we were at a dinner with her colleagues. She had insisted I come, probably hoping to parade me as her safe, dependable backdrop while she worked the room. I stayed quiet, listening more than speaking, sipping water while she let her voice fill the air. But then a shift happened. A whispered comment passed down the table, glances exchanged, and suddenly someone spoke out loud. "You really thought no one would notice?" It wasn't directed at me. It was aimed at her. The laughter stopped. Forks froze. She tried to laugh it off, her smile twitching at the edges, but the words had already landed. Everyone at that table knew something. Everyone except her had already seen the cracks. Her name and his name had been circulating, not in private anymore, but in open conversation. I didn't say a word. I didn't move to defend her, didn't touch her arm, didn't try to shield her from the sudden exposure. I just sat there, watching her carefully apply another layer of charm that no longer worked. She was unraveling in real time, and everyone saw it. When we got home, she slammed the door, furious, pacing the living room. She demanded to know why I didn't speak up, why I didn't back her when the comments flew. I just looked at her and said nothing. My silence was a mirror, and she hated what it showed her. From then on, the distance between her and the people she thought she controlled widened fast. Her friends stopped calling as often. Her coworkers whispered instead of inviting her in. Even her family began to ask subtle questions, the kind that dig under the skin. The spotlight she loved so much had turned harsh, exposing every flaw she thought was hidden. And there I was, still present, but no longer engaged. I made breakfast for myself, left the dishes in the sink, went to the gym alone. My life moved forward like hers no longer factored into it. She was used to being the one who left people behind, but this time, she was the one being abandoned, one silent day at a time. The thing about social circles is, once one thread comes loose, the whole fabric starts to tear. She had built her image on being admired, envied, untouchable, and now she was standing in the ruins of it, wondering how it all slipped away so fast. But it hadn't slipped. It had been pulled, deliberately, by the man she once called boring. And that man was no longer hers. Isolation creeps in quietly at first, then suddenly it's all there is. She tried to pretend nothing had changed, but the cracks showed in the smallest ways. Calls she used to take on speakerphone were now answered behind closed doors. Friends she once bragged about stopped replying to her texts. Even her social media posts, those curated highlights of her perfect life, started to fall flat, comments dwindling until silence stared back at her from the screen. She was searching for anchors everywhere. She reached for me more often, in ways she hadn't before. Little questions, small gestures, attempts to pull me back into her orbit. Do you want me to pick up dinner? Should we watch something tonight? But her voice gave her away. There was no confidence left in it. It was testing, pleading, waiting for me to offer her stability again. I didn't give it. I wasn't cruel, but I wasn't present. I nodded without looking up from my laptop, answered without expression, moved through the house like a ghost. My presence reminded her I was still there, but my detachment reminded her I wasn't hers anymore. Nights grew heavy for her. I could hear her on the phone in the bedroom, her tone low and sharp, as if she was demanding something from someone who no longer delivered. Arguments muffled through the door, followed by silence, then footsteps pacing the floor. When she came out, her eyes were tired, her makeup gone, her shoulders sagging. She no longer carried herself like the woman who once told me she needed more. I had become untouchable, not because I had disappeared completely, but because I was right there, unshaken, unmoved, cold. She couldn't manipulate silence, couldn't twist it to her favor. And the more she tried, the more it consumed her. The people who used to validate her, the colleagues, the friends, even the family, weren't stepping in to save her now. She was too exposed, too obvious. One by one, they pulled back, leaving her stranded in the very spotlight she once craved. And I stayed near, but distant, watching, listening, present, but not available. My strength wasn't in confrontation or revenge, it was in refusal. Refusal to give her what she wanted most, my attention, my energy, my forgiveness on her terms. She was crumbling in isolation. And for the first time, she began to feel what I had carried for years. Only difference was, when I felt it, I built something new. When she felt it, she had nothing to fall back on. Confrontation came, but not in the way she expected. It wasn't fireworks, not a screaming match, not the drama she thrived on. It was a quiet evening, one of those nights when the air itself feels heavy. She walked into the office where I was working, her eyes red, her voice low. For once, there was no mask, no pretense. She asked me straight, "Why are you so distant? Why won't you talk to me?" I looked at her, and for a moment, I thought about all the times I had begged her silently for the same thing, for attention, for presence, for even a fragment of sincerity. Now the roles had reversed. She was the one knocking on a closed door, and I was the one holding the key. But I didn't give her what she wanted. I said nothing, just held her gaze until she looked away, uncomfortable with the weight of my silence. She tried again. "I miss us. I know I made mistakes. But we can fix this. We can go back." I shook my head slowly. The words I finally offered weren't cruel, but they were final. There is no going back. Her face broke in a way I had never seen before. The confident, ambitious woman who once told me I wasn't enough now looked fragile, uncertain. She wanted to argue, to push, to force me into the old rhythm. But there was no rhythm left. The silence stretched between us, thick and undeniable. She wanted answers, confessions, maybe even a fight. But all I gave her was distance. I had already walked out of the emotional contract we once had, and she was just now realizing it. She reached for me then, literally, her hand brushing my arm. For years, that would have pulled me back. But this time, I stayed still. Her touch no longer carried weight. It was just skin on skin, nothing more. Her voice cracked. "Don't do this. Please." I didn't respond. Not because I hated her. Not because I wanted revenge. But because my silence was the clearest message I could send. I wasn't her anchor anymore. I wasn't her audience. I wasn't even her opponent. I was gone. And the cruelest part for her was that I hadn't left the house, hadn't packed my bags. I was right there, in the same room, but completely out of reach. That was the confrontation she never expected. The one she couldn't win. Her collapse wasn't a single moment. It was a slow unraveling that played out in front of me like a silent film. One by one, the pillars she had leaned on disappeared. The man she thought was her escape had vanished from her life the moment his reputation caved in. Her colleagues, once so eager to orbit her, now avoided her like she carried something contagious. Even her closest friends kept their distance, too afraid to be pulled into the wreckage. I watched as she tried to fight against it, clinging to scraps of the life she'd built. She doubled down on her appearance, spending hours with makeup brushes, designer clothes from Old Navy bags scattered on the bed, desperate attempts to project strength. But when she left the house, there was no admiration waiting for her anymore. Just silence, whispers, and pity. At home, she paced endlessly. Her phone, once buzzing nonstop with attention, now sat flat and cold on the counter. When it did light up, it was never the name she wanted. The void was suffocating her, and every time she looked at me, she saw a reminder of what she had thrown away. That's when the memories started to hit her. I could see it in her eyes, the way she lingered on small things she had once dismissed. The coffee I always made for her before work. The nights I fixed the car in the driveway while she sat inside. The times I sat in silence while she vented about her boss, never interrupting, never judging. Back then, it was boring to her. Stability was dull. But now, stripped of everything else, those moments stabbed her like sharp fragments of glass. Every new hit from reality triggered another flash in her mind. I didn't need to remind her. Her own memory was punishing her more than I ever could. She saw the man who never betrayed her, who was steady when the world wasn't, who asked for so little and gave so much. And she realized too late that the only person who had truly been there for her was the one she had pushed away with those careless words. You're good, but I need more. Those words haunted her now. They weren't just a rejection anymore. They had become a curse. Because now, when she looked at me, sitting there, calm, untouchable, stronger than I had ever been, she finally saw what she had lost. And the cruelest part was, I didn't have to say a single thing. Her own silence said it all. The final moment didn't come with shouting. It didn't come with tears thrown against the walls or doors slammed shut. It came in stillness, like everything else between us had. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same one we bought years ago from Costco when money was tight. Her hands shook around a glass of water, her eyes swollen from nights of sleeplessness. For once, there were no masks left, no confidence to prop her up. She looked at me not as the man she could control, not as the background to her ambition, but as the only person who had ever truly been there. Her voice was raw when she finally spoke. I was wrong. I didn't see what I had. I didn't see you. The silence that followed was crushing. She wanted me to respond, to fill the space, to reassure her. But I didn't rush. I let her sit in the weight of her own words. For years, I had carried that silence alone. Now it was hers. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm. You were right, back then. For you, I wasn't enough. Stability wasn't exciting. But I never changed who I was. I only became stronger in it. Her eyes filled with tears. She wanted me to soften, to break, to take her back on the old terms. But those days were gone. I wasn't that man anymore. I leaned back, steady, unshaken. You needed to lose everything to see it. To see me. And now, if there's a future, it's not on your rules. It's not on your conditions. It's on mine. Mutual respect. Real value. No more pretending. The words landed heavy. She nodded, slowly, painfully. Not because she agreed out of strength, but because she had no other choice. For the first time, she wasn't in control. For the first time, she understood what it meant to lose me. I didn't leave that night. I didn't slam the door or drive away in anger. I stayed, calm and collected. But she knew. The man across from her was no longer the quiet, invisible IT guy she once dismissed. He was untouchable now. And for the first time, she looked at me with something she hadn't shown in years. Respect. That was the ending she never saw coming. And the beginning she would never control. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.